Namaskar and a very happy new year to you all. And welcome to our third special lecture in the series, India, Our Mother, organized by Sri Aurobindo Society as part of the celebrations for the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. And we are really happy that for the first talk of 2022, we have a very special and important topic and an equally special guest to deliberate on that topic with us. So before I introduce the topic and the speaker, let me just quickly mention that I have with me my colleagues, Shweta from AuroYajna, Ram and Viswajita from AuroBharati, who are part of the organizing team for this and several other events that are part of the celebrations at Sri Aurobindo Society. So our topic today, as you all know, is India's mission, a spiritual fusion of religions. So of course, it's a very significant and a very vast topic, highly relevant for our times, both for India as well as the larger humanity, the larger world. And naturally, when we hear a topic like this, so many questions come to our mind. What does the spiritual fusion mean? What does it look like? Is that even possible? And why or how is it India's mission to work towards that? Is India marching toward fulfilling this mission, working towards this mission? What are the challenges? So these, and I'm sure several other questions, will be part of the deliberations that our speaker today will be sharing with us. So he's known as Dr. Anand Reddy to anyone who has even a slight interest in the vision and thought of Sri Aurobindo, particularly his integral philosophy. But to me, I call him Anand Bhaiya, my older brother. So, like I said, he really needs no introduction, but I don't want to miss out on this opportunity to share a few things about our speaker for the audience today. So I'll keep this introduction brief and I'll kind of give it a little personal twist because his other more professional bio can be easily accessed through Google. So it was in summer of 2004 that I had first met him on this beautiful campus of Sakar, Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research, an institute in Pondicherry, of which he's the founder director. And during that conversation, from that meeting, an idea kind of took birth to explore a collaboration between Sakar and Antioch University, Ohio in the US, where I was teaching at the time. And a few months later, I had an opportunity to host him at my home in Ohio. And he was on a lecture tour in the US at the time. And it was my privilege and pleasure to have him speak at Antioch University and have him meet my colleagues there. So our collaboration proceeded. And from that came up this academic space that was called Integral Knowledge Systems, which was through that we were able to bring master's level courses on various facets of Sri Aurobindo's thought and vision to students in the US and all online. And this was before this whole Zoom boom that has happened. So that's how my association with Anand Bhaiya got strengthened. And at the same time, I was myself doing a systematic study of the several texts of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother with close guidance from Anand Bhaiya. And then sometime, I think in 2006, he told me that he asked me if I could facilitate a short course on Foundations of Indian Culture for students at Sakar. And I said, what? I'm still a student myself. And he said, quoting Mother, he said, but the best way to learn is to start teaching. And that made me think that I was kind of working from, I should be working from this side of the collaboration. So I kind of jumped ship and I moved to Pondicherry immediately, like within a year, and joined Sakar in 2007. And I was working in various capacities with him, learning with him, studying with him, attending his courses, both at Sakar and the Hall of Harmony, his courses on Life Divine and Synthesis and Savitri. So I could kind of go on and on about my relation with him, but then let me just switch gears a little bit and talk about Dr. Ananda Reddy, who is an ex-student of the Ashram School, Sri Aurobindo Center, International Center of Education. And with blessings of the mother, he joined Auroville in 1969. And he was looking after Aspiration School in its very initial stages. And he was in Auroville till 1976 when he went to Hyderabad for his higher studies. He has advanced degrees in English and philosophy with his PhD in Sri Aurobindo's thought. And he's taught at various universities, including Pondicherry University, Assumption University at Bangkok, and also the higher course at the Ashram School, Ashram, Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education. And for years, he took weekly classes at Savitri Bhavan in Auroville as well. So he's, he's been awarded. He has lots of accomplishments. He's written several books, including that multi-volume series called titled Deliberations on Life Divine. And he's a member of the committee chaired by Prime Minister Modi to look after the celebrations, organized celebrations for 150th year. But despite all that, what I think Anand Bhaiya cherishes most is to be introduced as an aspiring, sincere child of the mother. So with that, I give the stage to him, invite him, and really it's my honor and privilege to have him here with us to talk about this very important topic, India's mission, a spiritual fusion of religions. So it's all yours, Bhaiya.
Thank you. Well, thank you, my very fond sister, Belu, for giving a very personal introduction, how we came together and how we worked together. Well, that was very touching indeed. It took me back to the home at Ohio and then all that and all that. However, yeah, life moves on and we have come to this great year, 2022. A year that will not be forgotten by all of us, the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. Each center is celebrating in its own way, paying our respect, tribute, our dedication, our pranams to Sri Aurobindo. And I'm happy that the year begins with my first talk that is about India. Because this is the topic that really unites India and Sri Aurobindo. Because both of them have a connection here. Now this year, 15th of August is 75th anniversary of India's independence. And it is Sri Aurobindo's 150th anniversary. So I feel there is a subtle link, a spiritual link, a destined link between Sri Aurobindo and the mothers and India. And of course, all of you know what he has written about India, its culture, its beautiful book, Renaissance in India, etc. But what we see, once it's interesting to see when somebody talked to the mother about India's independence and Sri Aurobindo's birthday, she said, no, correct it. It's Sri Aurobindo's birthday first and then India's independence next. And asked why? He said, because he was there. I'm not quoting exactly the words. Because of him, India got this independence. Of course, many others contributed to it in their own way, in their own level, in their own manner. So that's why I thought, something to do with India's mission would be very much appropriate to pay our homage to Sri Aurobindo as well as India. On 15th of August 2022, India would be celebrating her 75th anniversary of her independence. She is a young nation, but an ancient civilization. Young India had to shed off her backlog that she had burdened with she was burdened with from her Mughal and British conquerors. Shedding off her old slough had begun on 15th of August 1947, but it takes a long time to don the new body. A few decades back, the movement of our spiritual renaissance had begun with the coming of Sri Ramakrishna, the avatar of the new age, who had laid the foundation stone for a spiritual fusion of the religions in India. He showed us the direction of India's mission. So many people think and ask the question that Swami Vivekananda had mentioned that India would be the Guru of the world, Sri Aurobindo mentioned, the Mother mentioned, and many others too. But what exactly do we mean by this Guru of the world? Is it going to be a spiritual master? Is it going to be teaching lessons and Vedas and Gita and all that? Well, all that Sri Aurobindo does speak about in his 5 dreams, how India's wisdom and knowledge will overflow to the boundaries across the country. But I like to take it up in a different way. If we see the history of India since its birth, since the beginning of its cultural history, we see 2 strong tendencies. One is a cultural fusion, and then there is this question of religion and Sanatana Dharma. So these have been the unique things about our country. Maybe some of you would say, well, cultural fusion is there in all the countries, all the major countries in the world, especially the European countries. And especially it has been noted that the United States of America is really a place where there is a very beautiful cultural fusion. In fact, it was born out of the different cultures coming to this United States. But if we see India's culture, there has been, first of all, as it was noted by one of our sadhaks and disciples of Sri Aurobindo, Nullikanta Gupta, he said, wave after wave of the most heterogeneous and disparate elements, Sakas, Huns and Greeks, entered into the oceanic Indian life and culture and got merged in our culture as though it was a destiny to assimilate all the conflicting elements. I think it's a very beautiful, important point. We normally don't mention about this physical level of this encroaching upon our India's culture. But ultimately, all these cultures got what is, as God said, merged with India's culture. So that was the first cultural fusion that took place. Of course, there are some points and some of the signals, some of the things that we see still in Indian culture, the influences that have come from the Greeks. We'll talk about that later. Shravan himself mentioned that. So that was the first impact on the very physical level. And Indian culture absorbed all these things. But then there was what Nonleda would tell us, that there was a challenge. The real challenge came for Indian culture with Buddhism. Why do we say so? Buddha was born here, Buddhism developed here, Buddhism rampantly conquered many places in the country with their philosophy, with their lifestyle, with the sadhaks and with the scholars, etc. Well, we say it was the first challenge to Indian culture because Buddhism had denied the authorities of the Vedas. Remember that. We all philosophers, we know that. Buddhism denied and rejected the authority of the Vedas. Well, are we really feeling emotionally bad that they rejected the Vedas? No. A denial of the authority of the Vedas meant a great deal. It was a denial of the spiritual fullness of life. This is the great contrast between Buddhism and Hinduism. Whereas the Vedas, Upanishads, etc., they are taken to a spiritual fullness of life. And what is the meaning of fullness of life? All of us know, most of us would know. The four levels of India of life, and then the Artha, Kama, Moksha, etc., and Brahmacharya. Because we believed in the fullness. As mentioned the Isha Upanishad also, it is a fullness of life that we always say, live 100 years. It's not the number of years, but a fullness of life. And this is what was denied by Buddhism. It doesn't matter much if they accept it or not, but fundamentally, they brought in this kind of a schism. And that was the first division of religion, you may call it, that India had to face. And this is how India's fusion of religions began, the challenge. Now, if we see our own history, did we succeed in this or not? Yes. Indian culture has the great genius of assimilation, of acceptance, of fusion. And what did they do to really absorb Buddhism? It's not the philosophy. You see, India believes in different philosophies. It's not trying to say Buddhism is bad or wrong, or it's not ours, nothing of the sort. Indian genius was there in this fact that Buddha himself was made the 10th avatar, or one of the avatars of the 10 avatars. So immediately he became a part of Hindu culture. When we said the Buddha is an avatar, Buddhists themselves may not believe in that. I was in Thailand for a couple of years in the midst of pure Buddhism. They didn't call him an avatar. They just took to him as a great teacher. Of course, there's a tendency to any teacher in India, we have a tendency to call him a deity, but an avatar. But never they gave him the status of a god, godhead, or an avatar. But we in India, the Hindus, absorbed him as an avatar. So that took away the conflict between Hinduism and Buddhism. And of course, all those great Buddhist scholars were there. It became part of Indian culture that we have, like later on, we have Shankara philosophy, Ramanuja philosophy. It became, Buddhism also became part of Hindu philosophy. We may not call them Shaddarshan, but we were never against, or we never tried to reject. So that is how Buddhism, the cultural, the religious division was really bridged, and they become part of this Hindu culture. So that was also, Nalanda would say, he would say this division that came up about Buddhism and Hinduism was or commensurable. That's a beautiful word. That means they were not really alien. And even their philosophy of Asat and Maya and Nirvana, etc., they said, no, this is nothing alien. It was there originally in the Isha Upanishad, the Upanishads itself. The Sat and Asat and Maya and all that, these concepts were there. But it's only with the Buddhism that these were brought forward. So we see even in philosophy, the Upanishads are having Buddhism in it, but it's only Buddhism which brought it into the forefront of society and had a focus on that. So in a way, largely if we see, both the Buddha and the Buddhist philosophy were absorbed into Indian culture. And into Indian religions, it became part of our Hindu religion. So there's no conflict in that. And that lasted so many centuries. And most of us know what happened when Shankaracharya came, etc., etc. But then the real division came, the real shock, as Nalanda would say, a psychological cataclysm. A very strong word. A cataclysm, a psychological cataclysm, was what? Was the foreign element that was of Islam. So this is the major religious problem we have. Islam versus Hinduism. We will deliberate a little bit on this. But one thing we must note here, that we always speak of a psychological, religious debates and religious tolerance and all that. But I would say this kind of a religious tolerance or, dialogues on religion, etc., which I have also attended quite many when I was in Bangkok and other places. This question of intellectual Catholicity, all these are very superficial. We all attended the meetings, had a dialogue. I speak about Hinduism, he speaks about Buddhism, he speaks about Catholicity and Catholics and all that. And after the meeting, everybody goes back, nobody practices anything. So these are not the things that are going to bring together a synthesis. So what do we understand? How do we go about it? That's the real question. But before we take up from Sri Aurobindo's angle this question of the synthesis, the fusion between the two major divisions of not only culture is okay, we can absorb each other, but the thought, the mind pattern, the beliefs. So India is facing now, as it faced yesterday, centuries back, this psychological cataclysm between Islam and Hinduism. But maybe we need to go a little deeper into the question of religion now. In one of his chapters in the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo tells us that there are, in the evolution of human society, 4 major elements have come into play. First is religion, next is occultism, third is spiritual thought or philosophy, and last is spiritual experience. So it tells us that this is the way that humanity, wherever we are, not only in India but everywhere, these are the stages of human evolution of the society. It may take long time in religion or shorter time in occultism, doesn't matter. But these are the 4 main stages of human evolution. So this way, religion, which was the first born in this human society, in the development of human society, was acting on a concrete form. It always required a concrete form, what we call the church. But it was the first one to turn human beings, or I would say human aspiration, what Sri Aurobindo again called in the Life Divine, towards God, light and power, and bliss in the sense he will add that. So these are the stages, and religion has its play to turn humanity from the kind of the vulgar, the vulgarity of the physical level and the violence of the physical level. It's softened. Religion softened this human nature. Of course, we will say later on it's the same religion which really brought in the violence and the killings and all that. One religion against the other. But Sri Aurobindo is considered more as the role of religion. And religion also takes help of occultism sometimes, spiritual philosophy too. You see, quite many religions you will see are based on a philosophical thought, an intellectual philosophical thought. And then sometimes this philosophical thought, what we call theory, that is turned into occult practices. But that's where it gets into danger line. But these occult practices are also, sometimes we see, at least what we see at present, religion has got stuck in creed and dogma, and then kind of turning a few things into moral rules and regulations. But it has not gone too forward. It's not taken a step ahead behind this creed and dogma and pietistic emotion. And that is why one of the reasons why we have this kind of a conflict of religions, because it has not gone beyond this physical paraphernalia. So that has been more or less the story in summary of all these religions. But what we need to understand is that in India, religion has been a completely different approach to life. You see, in fact, I read out a quotation from Sri Aurobindo which gives us the sum and substance of Indian religion, what we call the Sanatana Dharma. It's marvelous. He would say for religion, India limited itself by no one creed or dogma. Already you see the complexity, the vastness. There's no one dogma or one creed. You cannot say this is Hinduism, this is not. But if you look around, you will see there's no one dogma. Even in my street, there's a different dogma on the left side street, another one on the right side street, there's another temple following a different dogma, different creed, different approaches. So there is this multiplicity of an approach which is not there in other religions. So our first foundation stone is a multiplicity of approaches to the divine. Next, it has not only admitted a vast number of different formulations, but contains successfully within itself all the elements that have grown up in the course of the evolution of religion. This is what is important to note. It has admitted, it has absorbed, it has accepted, it has, given growth to the course of the evolution of religions. That means it has followed a natural evolution of religion. What is the meaning of natural evolution? What we say Sri Aurobindo had mentioned earlier: religion, occultism, spiritual thought, and spiritual experience. So, unlike in the other religions, we in India, the Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, whatever you want to call it, never stopped with religion per se, with all the dogma and creed. Definitely, we have lots and lots of dogmas and creeds, and a lot of this paraphernalia of the ceremonies, the religious ceremonies. I mean, we in India, be it any state, right from north to south, east to west, every state has its own, this multiple formulations, different formulations with different. But the beauty is, it doesn't stop there. It has taken in occultism. It has taken in spiritual philosophy. So all this Shaddarshanas are nothing but spiritual philosophies. But leading you where? Leading you to a spiritual experience. So you see, this is the strange thing about Indian religion. It has simultaneously and parallelly all the four stages: religion, occultism, spiritual thought, and spiritual experience. So you see, Indian society, it depends where you are, in the religious state or on the occultism or in the level of spiritual philosophy, or people going into spiritual experience. We have the sannyasins, we have the Jain masters, everybody talking about a spiritual experience. Some people talk about spiritual occultism, or some people only talk about spiritual philosophy. But they're not contradictory. Spiritual philosophy is supportive and leads one, if one practices this spiritual philosophy, to spiritual experience. That is why we have so many yogis, we have so many sadhus, and they from their own level have taught us some philosophy, but always emphasizing about the Atman, about the divine, about the Lord, about Krishna, about Paramatman, about whatever the name. The beauty is the experiential part. But most of us in the society are either stuck in religious practices, or sometimes we talk about spiritual philosophy, but very few have practiced the spiritual philosophy and gone to the last stage. However, but all the four doors are simultaneously open. That is the grand master, that Indian spirituality. And then Sri Aurobindo would say, it has accepted spiritual philosophies of all kinds, follow to its highest, deepest, or largest outcome every possible line of spiritual realization and spiritual experience. That's why it's so wonderful to see. I mean, really, each state in India is not only just a different state in food and habits and dresses and all that, but in each state there is a dominance of one particular spiritual philosophy, and that spiritual philosophy leads into spiritual experience. Again, under that spiritual philosophy, there are countless saints and devotees. Be it Ramanuja, be it Shankaracharya, be it Jain Master, be it some Babaji here in the north or some. But it doesn't matter. So this is the acceptance of all the four. Then Sri Aurobindo strikes the beautiful line. He says, its method has been the method of evolutionary nature herself to allow all the developments. So this is why we call this a Sanatana Dharma. And when we talk of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga and integral philosophy, is exactly this, a method of evolution in nature. That is why even Sri Aurobindo's philosophy in yoga, it does not reject any practices. When it says all life is yoga, this is precisely that. Because nature is not just one track minded or one development or one religion or one country or one nation. No. Nature is concerned about humanity, about human growth, human development, human achievement. So for this achievement and growth, it uses every method. So we may call it specifically a yoga system and calling it this yoga and that yoga. But ultimately, Sanatana Dharma is nothing but using the method of evolutionary nature herself to allow all developments, all means of communication and action of the spirit upon the members. You see how Sri Aurobindo chooses every word. All means of communication. About what? And action of the spirit upon the members. So what is this communication we're talking about? Look up any raga, any dance program, any this thing is always about the Lord. So we are speaking about the Lord, about spiritual philosophy or experience through this communication. Be it this art or that sculpture or this temple or that puja for that matter. So this has been a wonderful communication and very open-ended communication and multifarious ways of communication. That's what our ancient system has said. There are as many ways to the divine as there are people. So Indian philosophy does not say dancing is bad, this is vital stuff, you should not have dances and music and all that. No. It has absorbed every human expression. Only thing is, somewhere we have forgotten the last step, the fourth step. We have got stuck in one of the stages. That is why in Untitled Chapter, Sri Aurobindo says all life is yoga. It can be turned into yoga because after all, his nature, his prakriti is the Lord behind it, it's the Ishvara behind it, who is orchestrating the whole thing. So he would say that, and each has to be allowed. The other one, he says, all stages of spiritual evolution are there in man, and each has to be allowed or provided with his means of approach to the spirit. And then it says always a communion between man and the supreme divine. So there's a communication and a communion. Communion is between the individual and the divine. So how I want to approach the divine is nobody's business. As long as I'm serious, as long as I really want to really go Godward, I take up my own method. So you see, even Sri Aurobindo mentioned somewhere, even the atheist in India is a great spiritual person. Even not to believe in God is also practice. Is also part of Indian system of Sanatana Dharma. This extraordinary freedom of approach to the divine, as Sri Ramakrishna said, and we have also said in the Vedas, with as many paths, as many paths are there, as there are so many people. So this complexity, this grandiose religion, what goes by the name of Sanatana Dharma, is the foundation. So if this is the Sanatana Dharma that we are preaching, that we believe in, that we are trying to practice in our own way, today it may be called a materialistic world, we are lost in the materialism, etc. All that, it's easy to say, standing on the podium, say, hey, we are lost in materialism, this is no good, all fine, nice lecture. But it doesn't stand any way, any truth, doesn't get any space in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. Because one who believes that all this is yoga and all behind all this there is a divinity, how can I say materialism is wrong? It may have a kind of a specific influence barring you from its next step. But it doesn't mean it has no role in the evolution of human nature or in the evolution of countries. Sri Aurobindo is one who absorbs and who sees a meaning behind everything. Call it materialism, call it science, technology and all that. But yes, of course, if it does not confuse us with our aspirations and kind of, take us away from our path, it has a role. Even in our own individual growth, we do have this kind of a role. We do not become spiritual on day one or on the age of 16 or 18 or 19 or 20. I show him the rest of the synthesis. Each individual has to go through an evolution of his own being. from the physical to the vital to the mental then to the spiritual. So there is that evolutionary process. Well, coming to that. Now coming back to this question of religion. Now Sri Aurobindo, if this is the meaning that he gives to religion, to Sanatana Dharma, now in the light of this approach, can we solve this fusion, the question of fusion between the greatest psychological cataclysm that is Islam and Hinduism? See, we are on that topic. But I have to first understand what is it that we're talking about religion when it comes to Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma. Having said that, now we can confront the question of the possibility of this fusion. But before taking it up, I'd like to read out to you a couple of letters from Sri Aurobindo, written to a Muslim devotee. And it throws us a great, comprehensive view of Sri Aurobindo regarding Islam and Hinduism. I brought this purposely into my conversation, into my talk, because in the recent times, I've heard people speaking from the dais that Sri Aurobindo was a great Hindu. Sri Aurobindo is kind of advertised as one of the greatest Hindu masters. But in one place, I had even denied that openly. There was some grumbling from the audience. But I believe Sri Aurobindo is beyond all these religions. And here are a few letters to prove my point. One Muslim gentleman who was living in the Ashram, the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Pondicherry, had doubted if India can assimilate Islam in its fold. Sri Aurobindo says right back, why not? India has assimilated elements from the Greeks, the Persians, and other nations. But she assimilates when her central truth is recognized by the other party. And even while assimilating, she does it in such a way that the elements absorbed are no longer recognizable as foreign, but become part of herself. For instance, we took from the Greeks architecture, from the Persian painting. It throws a lot of light. He said, we assimilate very easily. Who assimilates? Who can assimilate? Let's see that. The one who has a vastness of consciousness. It's like all kinds of rivers flow into the ocean. And when they flow into the ocean, they get assimilated. And if they get assimilated, that they cannot even be recognized. It is Jamuna or Ganges or this river or that river once they go into the ocean. That's precisely what Indian culture is, Indian spirituality is, Indian Sanatana Dharma. It's so vast in this consciousness that it can assimilate anything and every religion, every culture, and make it its own. It does not say, this is Persian painting, this is Rajasthani paintings are influence of Persia, this is an influence of Greek culture. No, it becomes our own. And our is that oceanic consciousness. So Sri Aurobindo writes the same thing, that it gets one into itself. But one of the most important elements, if you have noted here, is India, but she assimilates when her central truth is recognized by the other party. Now the question is, what is this central truth? Before we discuss that, I'll read another quotation. The assimilation of the Mohammedan culture also was done in the mind to a great extent, and it would have perhaps gone further. This is writing from Sri Aurobindo. So we have assimilated so many cultures, so many religions, so many ways of different thinking and belief. And what is beautiful is, on the level of the mind, our Indian culture had assimilated Mohammedan culture also. I mean, even Islam had come very close on the mental level. But in order that the process may be completed, it is necessary that a change in the Mohammedan mentality should come. The conflict is in the outer life, and unless the Mohammedans learn tolerance, I do not think this assimilation is possible. So here we have a very clear answer. Philosophically, we have nothing to grudge against Islam. When we have absorbed so many different philosophies, Islam is also one more philosophy we can take in. But unfortunately, the division is in the outer life. The emphasis of Islam is on the outer life, their practices and all that. And they have not recognized, as Ashram that time and again says, it has to be, the central truth has to be recognized. Philosophically, attitudinally, Shravanda writes, the Hindu is ready to tolerate. He is open to new ideas and his culture has got a wonderful capacity for assimilation, but always provided that her central truth is recognized. What is the central truth that Shravanda is speaking about? But here, if I could put it in brief, what we have been seeing from the Vedas itself, that there is only one divinity, but that one divinity has many forms. It is manifested in many forms and names. But we do not say this Indra or Varuna, this is the supreme. They're all different aspects of the one supreme, Sachidananda or Brahma or whatever you call it. So there's a oneness of divinity. So that is one of the central truths. And then the second one is that is a representation of that highest divinity in all of us. Like we said, the Atman, the Jiva. So there's the divine within each individual. And even in the atomic level, there's the divinity there. So the divine is not just, separated in the transcendental world and say, I have nothing to do with the world. No. Divine is there in the human beings, in the animals, in the plants, in the atom, in the matter itself. And then lastly, as I've been emphasizing before, there are as many ways to the divine as there are people. So this, and we have seen these are the three central truths that we have been practicing. Sanatana Dharma is based on these three central truths. And so this is what Sri Aurobindo would say, if Islam can accept this central truth, that means they can follow their own. But it has to be said that even others, Hinduism or Christianity, even they are also the same divine. So he said this central truth, if it is not accepted and practiced in the outer life, Sri Aurobindo says it may be difficult unless and until the other side accepts this central truth. That's what happened. In fact, when he was discussing that, Sri Aurobindo would say when in the time of the Mughals, we had kind of come very close to culture, in cultural fusion. We didn't have much of a difficulty. Of course, there have been Mughal emperors also who have been very open and all that. But somewhere in the present times, because of whatever reasons, we call it political, we call it social, because of whatever the divisions are coming. So he says, this is the difficulty. And since the time Sri Aurobindo wrote this, long back, 30s or 40s, I don't know exactly. We can see that there's not been much of a change in the Mohammedan mentality. Unlike other religions which mingle with the central truth and spirit of Hindu life and culture, Islam maintains a strong, uncompromising individuality. And it may take a very long time for fusion to be possible on the outer level. Hinduism has not solved the problem of its central challenge, that of resolving the psychological cataclysm. But in order to move towards a greater role and destiny, that of becoming a spiritual guru of the world, it has to find a solution to solution on the plane of spiritual consciousness. And here is a quote from Sri Aurobindo. This is the central quote around which I was inspired to write this article. Sri Aurobindo would say, I have written clearly that the coming of so many religions to India was part of her spiritual destiny and a great advantage for the work to be done. Is on this line hangs my whole article. Coming of religions was part of her spiritual destiny and a great advantage to her work. So this is the work that she has to do, to really take all these religions and fuse them together. But up until now, I'm afraid not much fusion has been possible, especially with Islam, because it's been a very individualistic and a very firm religion which follows its own dogmas and its own philosophy. But there has not been much of a rapprochement, as you say. But then, if Sri Aurobindo calls that this is our spiritual destiny, so this is where we say India is the guru of the world. This is exactly the spiritual destiny of India, is to have this fusion of religions. We have failed till now, no doubt. We have really accepted Buddhism. Even Christianity has not been much of a problem. I know there are some superficial difficulties, but the real challenge comes from Islam. But have we succeeded, or can we succeed, or is it possible? That's a question that we have in front of us. Well, definitely, if it cannot fulfill its division, it will, like other religions, have no significant role to play in the coming spiritual and supramental age. You see, this is the challenge. If it doesn't fulfill this role of a spiritual fusion, Hinduism itself may not have any place in the future spiritual and supramental age. Well, what is the supramental age? Maybe some of you may not know about that. Maybe I too am not too sure. But still, again, Sri Aurobindo is there always to save us, to help us. He writes to this Muslim gentleman in another letter. He says, what is being done here? Here is the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Pondicherry, is the preparation of a truth which includes all other truth but is limited to no single religion and creed. And this preparation has to be done apart in silence until things are ready. The Sri Aurobindo was already conscious about this problem, and his working for the supermind, apart from many other reasons of human consciousness, development of earth and etc., particularly for India, is very, very important. Because it's only in that kind of a higher consciousness of spirituality, connected with the spirituality of the supramental age, that there will be this solution. In fact, in another letter he says, there's no place for rigid orthodoxy, whether Hindu, Mohammedan, or Christian in the future. So this is the signal, this is the guidelines he gives to all those Hindus, Sanatan Dharmists, whatever we have taken pride of. You see, first thing is rigid orthodoxy. This is against any future spirituality. This is what is blocking Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma for really being successful in its own achievement. That is the real spiritual fusion. So we have to note that any kind of orthodoxy is not acceptable in the future. In the supramental creation, fundamental truth will always find a place. But orthodoxy means a clinging to narrow limitations. Now you can read a lot into each of these phrases. Clinging to narrow limitations. And limitations of that kind cannot exist in the supramental creation. So again, this is a kind of a narrowness that comes in by religion. By clinging to this religion, says, my religion alone is the truth. Even if Hinduism says, I am the best, I'm alone the best one, even there we are wrong. We should never go to claim that we are the highest, we are the best religion, never. Because any idea of question of orthodoxy, rigid orthodoxy, or clinging to narrow limitations cannot exist. All that is permanently true will be taken up into the creation of the future. And then he would say, very strong words, on the other hand, I have not the slightest objection to Hinduism being broken to pieces and disappearing from the face of the earth if that is the divine will. This really must send a message to all those who really want to stamp Sri Aurobindo as a Hindu. Because look at this last line, it says, I have no attachment to past forms. What is truth will always remain. The truth alone matters. You can see what kind of a person was he. Was he Hindu? Was he this? No. Nothing of the past forms he is attached to. He only says, that even Hinduism, if it becomes useless for the future, it will be erased and disappear, it will disappear from the face of the earth. So this is the central message I want to tell to some of the people who really consider Sri Aurobindo to be a Pakka Hindu, and we approach him as a Hindu and preach Hinduism standing on the shoulders of Sri Aurobindo. So what we get here is that Sri Aurobindo talks of a speech of a future spiritual age, which is very, very important for Hinduism, for India especially. And unless and until we move toward this kind of a spirituality, we cannot really think of a kind of a fusion. Because the present existent philosophies do not have much of this scope. It has got to be a higher consciousness. And a higher consciousness where things are very open. And that is what Sri Aurobindo writes in his great, beautiful book, Renaissance in India. That spirituality is the master key of India's mind. Well, spirituality, we have been asked, we have been told that we must look at all the expressions of life, religion, art, science, business, services, all as forms and names of the single spirit, the divine. That is the spiritual outlook. A spiritual person is one who has the fundamental and essential experience of whatever religion he may choose to be or may choose to belong, and has a catholicity of understanding which comes essentially out of his deeper inner self. So I'm going now closer to this question of what kind of a spirituality. But the supramental age is a bit far from for us. But still, those of us who want to practice this, first of all, our vision should be all our expressions of life, and all these expressions of life, be it art or science or technology or materialism, whatever it is, they're all expressions of the single truth, the divine. So this is the comprehensive Catholic approach. So it doesn't make a religion in this and that. And now I understand why the first thing that the mother talked about Aurobindo is no religions, no creed, no nationality. You can see the foundations of Aurobindo are so solid. Do we realize that? Do we manifest that? Is it going to be successful? Is not our business. That only she will look after. It's her dream. But you see, the first principles are exactly those principles which really will take us toward the supramental age. When she said no religion, it means you go beyond the religion into a spiritual life, into a spiritual belief where all things come together. And then she would say, the adherence to a higher truth without barriers of customs, creeds, ceremonies is the thing that is wanted in India. It may seem an ideal that is beyond the possibility of the common man. But a spiritual symbiosis is the only way of the future. The principle of symbiosis, exemplified in the 100 monkey phenomenon, I think most of you would know what I mean by that, can come of use here. That is, if there is a strong nucleus of spiritual aspirants, a growing number of seekers assimilating the new consciousness is enough to start an atomic reaction which would one day explode into a spiritual bomb, engulfing all humanity in a new light and life. So what I'm giving you here is not what is happening today, but what is possible and what is the way out. It's exactly what is being practiced in the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, as Sri Aurobindo himself said, and as the mother gave a hint about Aurobindo. So there is now the new path is open. So India can be inspired by these experiments. It's not I'm trying to advertise Aurobindo or Sri Aurobindo Ashram, no. But this idea of a spiritual fusion is a possibility only if we can really change our attitude and then practice it and not just only speak about it. And now in one of his books, The Ideal of Human Unity, Sri Aurobindo has given it a little different name to this question of spirituality of the new age. He calls it the religion of humanity. The religion of humanity is the future religion which will bring in the psychological unification of humanity. And in this future religion, or the religion of humanity, which will go beyond religions. And the principle of this religion of humanity is a triple principle, what we call as a freedom, equality, and unity. The Sanatana Dharma is well grounded on this triple gospel and could become the ideal of the religion of humanity, but not until it fulfills itself in the life of the human race. A note from Sri Aurobindo. Of course, here we are speaking about something that's on the level of human unity, not just India. But why I have brought in this idea from Sri Aurobindo's ideal of human unity is that even in this effort of human unity, the lead will come only from India. That's the message. And that he has said quite many different ways, even in his 5 dreams. Especially the 3rd dream or the 4th dream, where he speaks about the human unity. He says India can take a lead towards this human unity. Human unity means there has to be freedom, equality, and what we say fraternity. Sri Aurobindo uses the word unity. These are the triple principles of the new age, the religion of humanity, which will be a combining the entire humanity. So what is important that I noted in this is India will take the lead. So again, there's a question of a spiritual guru or the fusion of religions, because India alone, with all its spiritual background, what the Vedic rishis have done, the saints have done, the devotees have done, but all the time emphasizing upon the spiritual experience. So what we see in India today happening is a marvelous development on the material, social levels, but we are stuck in the fundamental, the basic division that we have on the psychological level. And until and unless India fulfills this or overcome this barrier for psychological catastrophe, cataclysm, India will never become the guru of the world. It may be very powerful, it may have all the influences and all that, the present history, most of you know that. But it can fulfill its role as the guru of the world only by the fusion of religions. It has done so in the past, it can do so now, but because there's so much of division, this division can be united by a spiritual experience, not by spiritual philosophies, not by occultism, not by religion. Lord Sri Aurobindo spoke of the 4th level. Unless India moves to the 4th level very consciously, and even in the 4th level, as I said, it can be a few people. It's not necessarily the whole of the country awakened to the 4th level of spiritual experience. But it's basically, as Sri Aurobindo mentions, first a small group that must come together with this aspiration and with this practice. It's not just giving talks and reading books and saying I've read Sri Aurobindo all the 30 volumes. Not at all. An iota of practice in this true level. In your own consciousness, if you do not have this division, then you are already taking a step forward. If we read Sri Aurobindo and we still believe in these divisions of this and the psychological cataclysm and all that, it won't work. So, in Sri Aurobindo's yoga and mother's message, first thing she said is go beyond religion. And the technique of that is by wedding to a spiritual life. And a spiritual life which is to be practiced and lived. There lies Sri Aurobindo's message of India's guru of the world. Otherwise, at least personally, I've read so much of Sri Aurobindo, but seeing the reality beside me in the country and society, and there are very, very few. The group that has really gone beyond, is going beyond, is very small. That's why we have to wait longer. It's only this small group which increases its dimension and its intensity that can lead to the future. That's where Sri Aurobindo's yoga comes into play. and what he has said through yoga, we can reach this higher spirituality. So we see, friends, India's true mission is that fusion of religions, which signifies that we have to go into higher consciousness, a higher consciousness which goes by the truth and truth alone, not by Hinduism, Mohammedanism, Christianity, none of the isms. The Sri Aurobindo was very strong that I do not care a bit even if Hinduism has to go. Because if it becomes a religious orthodoxy, it cannot have a future. I think the message is very clear. It may be sometimes shocking, unbelievable, but yes, we have to speak the truth about Sri Aurobindo, and I do not mince my words to present Sri Aurobindo as he wanted it to be in his own letters. Thank you so much for it.
Thank you, Bhaiya. Yes, no mincing of words. Thank you. I really appreciated that last comment you made. Ram, would you see if there are any questions or comments from anyone? I have a comment or this thing. I think you covered a lot of ground, Bhaiya. With starting with the understanding of what Sanatana Dharma is, or what religion, what is Indian understanding of religion. And that was important to understand that it is only in the fold of that a possibility of fusion arises. So, but the one thing that there is actually a question also here. One thing that you said is, unless what Sri Aurobindo's letter, reading Sri Aurobindo's letter to, I believe it's to Dara, that unless Mohammedans learn tolerance, that kind of acceptance will not be possible. What can be done as a society, as a nation can be done for that tolerance to emerge? Do we have to wait till it happens one person at a time, or is there something else that can be done, or is it through that, like the spiritual experience that you talked about? So,
yeah. Yes, Velu, your question is very valid and maybe it's there in the minds of many people. And but as we have seen, nothing outer can be done, because spirituality is again not a kind of a outer do's and don'ts. It's got to be, outer do's and don'ts have led us to one more religion, and ultimately they are antagonistic. But in India also there's a new religion, new caste, and new creed every other year. But what is happening? Is this division going away? But as you said, have the Mohammedans, if they have to change their view. But yes, as we said here, they have a very strong individualistic existence, and they believe in that. Unless and until we are individualistic and really stuck to our own method, uncompromising individuality, their existence and survival may be in danger. However, whatever they believe, this question of, as you said rightly, that can anything be done? No. As I also mentioned in my talk, no amount of talks and dialogues and all that. Belu, even in our own life, the only solution Sri Aurobindo says is to move towards a spiritual consciousness. All physical ailments or mental problems or peace problems or whatever you see, the only solution he has given us is to move towards a spiritual consciousness. And those of you who are reading Sri Aurobindo's philosophy in yoga, we know what it means. It means moving towards one's own psychic realization. It's a long demand. It's a difficult demand. It may take its time. But I'm afraid we have to be honest and really forthright to say yes. Until that is done, Sri Aurobindo writes in one way, there are hundreds of methods have been practiced to bring unity in religions and this and that. Nothing has worked. Nothing will work. So it's not the question of waiting for time. Yes, time is a factor. But as I mentioned here, there's got to be a group, some individuals. It does not mean in one geographical place. It can be in London or in Netherlands or in America, in Pondicherry or in whatever place, Australia. So this group is not a physical grouping. It's a consciousness that connects itself wherever the individuals are aspiring. So that is why this yoga and philosophy Sri Aurobindo is universal. It doesn't mean that we have to be coming to an ashram or to an Auroville or nothing of the sort. So definitely, in no compromising words, Sri Aurobindo sticks on to this question of the spiritual consciousness, a rise in spiritual consciousness, which alone can solve all these divisions, not only in religion, in nationalities, in nation egos, and everywhere. I mean, the divisions are plenty. I've spoken only about religion, but it's there on every level, from the individual to the national level and all that. So, Belu, I think we have to be honest to say that until and unless human beings turn towards spirituality, no other ism, no other practice will work. It's only again prolonging our own suffering. So that's why the urgency of practicing Sri Aurobindo's solution is the question of religion, the question of spiritual consciousness. Even when she speaks about message about Sri Aurobindo's action, she doesn't give you outer methods. She has given a beautiful message of Sri Aurobindo's action. But what is that action? It's the inner action. Going across and giving talks and lectures and webinars and seminars is fine. It's to spread Sri Aurobindo's consciousness, and maybe some people will contact some message. They will read some message and they turn to an inner life, because I do get a lot of emails and youngsters coming around. This is, sir, I've been to Pondicherry, I've heard your talk, I've heard this paper, I've heard this. And somehow something clicks. And this is what I'm counting upon. This something clicks. That means there is an aspiration that really is there in the person. And this message of these words of Sri Aurobindo, it becomes like a starter. There's a quick kick start, as we say. And this is how these small numbers are growing. So I'm not pessimistic about that. It is growing. And very important is, and what I believe personally is, it is she and Mother and Sri Aurobindo who are working on this preparation also. I mean, if we are just open-minded a little bit and not being dogmatic and narrow in our minds, Mother and Sri Aurobindo, they themselves are preparing the new race in the sense of the new aspirants. I think we do our own individual work on ourselves and leave the rest to them, because we cannot do more than that. As we ultimately know, the best way to progress, the best way to help mankind or humanity or earth is to work and transform oneself. Yes, that's the thing. I think it may look a little difficult, but Sri Aurobindo says many a time, we should not waste another 1,000 years trying to find out other psychological means and this means and all that. Well, I think we can go longer, but I think in brief, I'll tell you that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So anyone else have any questions?
Yeah. Yes, please allow me to speak.
Please.
This is Shudipto from Kolkata. Dr. Reddy, good evening. And
Good evening.
thank you very much for this wonderful class that you held. Thing is, I think it's time, it's more than long past since we have bothered about fusion of religions across the world. Islam has been here in this subcontinent for more than 1,000 years. And still then, Sanatan Dharma has failed to assimilate Islam, leave alone other religions. Simply for the reason that you have stated very clearly. It's their obstinacy and orthodoxy, very stern orthodoxy, that has prevented this assimilation of Hinduism, of taking in Islam as a part of its own. So, and we cannot expect this to happen at any time in our lifetimes. I don't think that is going to happen. So the only thing that is possible within our lifetimes is what Sri Aurobindo and his mother has taught us, and to follow your words that you just now spoke, is to transform your own inner self and not bother about whether this fusion of religions is taking place. I think we can cultivate ourselves and try to change ourselves from within. And that is the only hope that we can have for the future, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I don't know your name, but yeah, you have just said what I was emphasizing on. The whole work is of the individual. These individuals from Australia or America or West Bengal or Ceylon, it doesn't matter where we are, but our consciousness, it gets linked up. There's a networking of the consciousness, and this, when it gets intensified, as I gave the quotation of the 100th monkey phenomenon, there's a specific time, there's a specific timeline, when suddenly the whole thing will burst open and will spread across. So that is a phenomenon that they have spoken about them in a different way, not in the 100th monkey phenomenon. But this is what Sri Aurobindo does say, that there will be a sudden burst. But until then, as the egg is there being prepared under the shell, the chicken comes out at an appointed time. But until then, we don't know anything happening. We just see the egg. But there's a preparation, and that preparation is what you rightly said. Individually, we all do our own yoga, our own transformation, our own psychic contact, and this intensifies, and the pressure will one day burst open, and there will be the new chicken that will come out. Yeah, rightly. What you mentioned is right.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Shudipto from Kolkata.
I got a message. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, may I say something?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Urmila Anandhai.
Yeah.
I would like you to elaborate a little more about the occult aspect that you spoke about. Is the occult aspect also the same as you talked about the egg that is preparing within it, the chicken that is to be coming out? Is that the occult aspect of religion?
No. In fact, the occult aspect is a kind of a process in the society to come to the spiritual experience. And until then, there's no egg and the chicken that's being prepared. It's a spirituality that is quite hidden and that's being prepared, because that is the last stage, the last leap of human consciousness. But until then, it's more or less an evolutionary stage, in the sense one comes out of the other and then it takes its own time, its own difficulties. But what we're talking about is the spiritual consciousness that will be prepared in the individual and it will burst as the chicken. So this occultism has had its own influence in the growth of the human consciousness, but not in giving you a spiritual experience or a spiritual realization. On the contrary, these occult things may deviate you from a spiritual path. That's why Mother Sri Aurobindo had never given us the possibility, the question of saying you follow occultism. But it is a truth. Many people in the world follow that, and they become victims of these occult forces. But we, in the spiritual consciousness, we are not asked to go back into the occult consciousness. And the question of the chicken and the egg is belonging only to the spiritual consciousness, spiritual experience. So there, the thing is individual. We have to come back to all of us, as Sudipto Sen said, to our own individual evolution of consciousness within us. So it's good to know what Sri Aurobindo is telling us, Mother has told us, but ultimately they will say, all this is knowledge. But if you want to practice, you practice it on yourself. So this is the ultimate message. And the Mother used to tell the children of the ashram, the students of the ashram, psychic realization is the beginning of the beginnings. All the rest, you leave it to the future and to the divine. So all the works that you are doing, all the thought that you are doing, all the action that you are doing, all the emotions that you have had, turn it towards the psychic realization, psychic offering. So if I can consciously do that as much as possible, then I would have contributed a little one atom toward this spiritual consciousness and age. But we have to, every atom becomes a nucleus and the nucleus becomes a nuclear bomb.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there any other comments or questions? I think there is a lot to absorb and assimilate. So I'm sure there will be questions coming to you directly afterwards. So I think if there are no comments or questions at this point, we can close. Shweta, would you like to say something?
Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you so much for, I don't think there could be such a great beginning of the year other than this. Thank you, Bilyudi, for asking Bhaiya for this. And of course, he has been really, kind and warm, always accepting our invitation. As the first celebration of International Yoga Day, he was there with us in 2020. So, and always, Anand Bhaiya and Didi, I've always seen them as a wonderful, Deepshik Hari and him, as a wonderful combination of his psychicized mind and his psychicized vital. That's what I have experienced in their presence always. And it's always wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Bhaiya, if you think this is the only thing we have in plan, Shweta and I have been talking, we have some big plans to bring you back with us for some bigger programs. So, but this was just the start with 1 hour. So, but on a very important, like I said, and a very, really very timely, significant topic, especially in this 150th year, as a lot of people are talking about Sri Aurobindo in a lot of different ways. So this was
I'm sure these
very much-
questions about Islam and Hinduism must have come about even in this Sri Aurobindo's conferences, and this is quite the hot topic. You know, the way things are happening in the country between the two communities. I think it's good we address the problem right on its face. Yeah, thank you, Belu, for that.
Yes, thank you so much. So, and thank you, everyone.
There is a beautiful comment in the chat box. Shall I read it out from
Yes.
Meenakshi? So, wonderful takeaway from the session. Transform yourself with sincere aspiration and leave the rest to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Thank you, Meenakshi.
That's the essence of the whole talk, not only mine, of all the talks. Gita says that, Sri Aurobindo says that, Mother says that. There's the essence of all spiritual life itself. Gita says, do your work and leave the rest to the divine. This is precisely the thing. I'm so happy about the comment. Thank you for whoever has commented.
I'd like to take the opportunity to share with everyone and also with Bhaiya that what he said about practicing it, and even if a small sangha or a group of people are really ready for it, the work will be done, the divines will be done. So I think that you must be aware, at least Bhaiya, and few of us are aware of this place which was called as Academy House once, and now it has been named as Matri Niketa, so the mother's abode. And the objective of the place is the same what Bhaiya is saying. Those people who are really aspiring and looking forward to their new future, they can come together and do their sadhana and make the place ready for the coming generations.
Yes.
Not the coming generation, but this generation itself. Don't leave it to the future. Start with oneself. That's the beginning. Really, I truly believe, they, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, have come as not only as avatars, but the beauty of this avatar is that they are preparing humanity. I mean, as I told you again in my talk, people are coming for not heard of Sri Aurobindo, not heard of their yoga, but somehow, somewhere, they are getting connected. And that's what I call Sri Aurobindo is preparing the new generation himself. So if we are open to them, if you have heard their name somewhere, some message, we are the blessed ones. I mean, I don't call it that Christian sense of blessed, but we are somewhere open to the new consciousness. And that will take care because their grace and presence is universal. They're not just in Pondicherry, they're spread all over the world. And be it my friends, Netherlands, there, Ad and Nelike, or anybody, we all know what it means to take their names. Thank you, Deva.
Thank you. Thank you. There is one more comment here. Can we have another class by Dr. Reddy on the basic practices, all of us who are inclined towards integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother to follow in the near future? So yes, whoever sent this question, we are thinking along similar lines. Shweta and I have been talking about it. So hopefully in the near future, we will be able to offer something with Anand Bhaiya on these lines. Thank you so much, Bhaiya. And thank you to all the participants who joined us for this very enlightening session. And please stay in touch, and we'll be bringing to you more and more of sessions, both with Anand Bhaiya as well as other speakers on various topics.